Hello and welcome to Nightmare Lullabies. As you settle in for the night, prepare to be immersed in a world of eerie whispers and unsettling tales, designed to both chill and soothe. Now close your eyes, relax, and let the darkness carry you away. And if these nightly tales captivate you, feel free to join our community for more whispered secrets. On the evening of May 3, 2007, the small resort town of Praia da Luz in Portugal's Algarve region was bathed in the soft glow of a late spring sunset. The Ocean Club, a popular holiday complex, buzzed with the quiet hum of families winding down after a day of sun and sea. Among them were Kate and Jerry McCann, both 39, who had arrived a week earlier with their 3 children, 3-year-old Madeleine and her 2-year-old twin siblings, Sean and Amelie, for a much-needed family vacation. The McCanns, both doctors from Leicester, England, had been looking forward to this trip, a chance to relax with friends and create memories with their young children. But by the end of that evening, their lives would be irrevocably changed as Madeleine vanished from their apartment, sparking one of the most high-profile missing person cases in modern history. Kate and Jerry had met in 1993 while working as junior doctors in Glasgow. They married in 1998 and settled in Rothley, Leicestershire, where they built a life together. After struggling with infertility for years, they turned to IVF, and in 2003, Kate gave birth to Madeleine Beth McCann on May 12. 2 years later, in 2005, the twins, Sean and Amelie, were born, completing their family. Madeleine, with her blonde hair, bright smile, and a distinctive fleck in her right iris, was a lively and curious child, adored by her parents. The family's trip to Portugal was part of a group holiday with 7 friends, known as the Tapas 7, and their children, a total of 9 adults and 8 children. They had booked apartments at the Ocean Club through Mark Warner Ltd, a British travel company, and spent their days swimming, playing tennis, and enjoying the resort's amenities. The McCann's apartment, 5A, was on the ground floor of a block near the resort's tapas restaurant, about 55 meters away. It was a modest space with a small patio, accessible from the street via a gate and a sliding glass door. On the evening of May 3rd, the group followed their usual routine. They put their children to bed around 7:30 p.m. and gathered at the tapas restaurant for dinner, taking turns to check on the sleeping children every half hour. Kate and Jerry felt safe leaving Madeleine, Sean, and Amelie alone in the apartment, believing they could see the apartment from the restaurant and that the checks would ensure the children's safety. At 8:30 p.m., as the adults sat down to dinner, all seemed well. Jerry checked on the children at 9:05 p.m., finding them asleep, though he later recalled that the bedroom door was slightly more open than he had left it, a detail that would haunt him. At 9:30 p.m., one of their friends, Matthew Oldfield, offered to check on the McCann children during his own round. He entered the apartment through the unlocked patio door, glanced into the bedroom, and saw the twins sleeping in their cots. He noticed Madeleine's bed, but didn't look closely enough to confirm she was there, assuming all was fine. He returned to the restaurant and told Kate and Jerry everything seemed in order. But at 10 p.m., when Kate went to check, she found the bedroom door wide open and the window ajar, its shutter raised. Madeleine's bed was empty, her favorite toy, a pink stuffed cat named Cuddle Cat, lying where she had been. Panic surged through Kate as she searched the apartment, calling Madeleine's name. She ran back to the restaurant, her voice breaking as she shouted, "Madeleine's gone. Someone's taken her." The group sprang into action, searching the apartment and the surrounding area, while the resort staff called the police. The Polícia Judiciária, PJ, Portugal's criminal investigation agency, arrived around 11 p.m., but the initial response was chaotic. Language barriers and a lack of immediate resources hampered the effort. Only a handful of officers were available, and the scene was not properly secured, allowing dozens of people to trample through the apartment. Kate and Jerry clung to the belief that Madeleine had been abducted, pointing to the open window and raised shutter as evidence. They spent the night in a state of shock, surrounded by friends and resort staff, as the first hours of the investigation unfolded. By morning, news of Madeleine's disappearance had spread, and the quiet resort town was swarming with journalists, marking the beginning of a media frenzy that would follow the case for years. As dawn broke on May 4th, 2007, Kate and Jerry stood outside the Ocean Club, clutching each other and Madeleine's cuddle cat, their faces etched with fear and desperation. They had no idea that this was only the beginning of a long, painful journey, one that would test their resilience, strain their marriage, and thrust them into the global spotlight as they fought to find their daughter. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann had just begun to unravel a mystery that would captivate the world, leaving more questions than answers in its wake. The morning of May 4th, 2007, dawned with a heavy sense of dread in Praia da Luz, Portugal, as the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeleine McCann sent shockwaves through the small resort town. Madeleine had vanished from her family's ground-floor apartment at the Ocean Club the previous night, leaving her parents, Kate and Jerry McCann, in a state of panic. The Polícia Judiciária, PJ, Portugal's criminal investigation agency, had arrived around 11 p.m. on May 3rd, but their initial response was disorganized, with the crime scene compromised by dozens of people searching the area. As the first full day of the investigation began, the McCanns clung to hope that Madeleine would be found, while a media frenzy erupted and early leads began to emerge, setting the stage for a complex and controversial case. Kate and Jerry, both 39, spent the night in a friend's apartment at the Ocean Club, unable to return to their own, which was now a crime scene. They sat huddled together, clutching Madeleine's pink stuffed toy, Cuddle Cat, their faces pale with exhaustion and fear. The twins, Sean and Amelie, just 2 years old, slept nearby, unaware of the chaos unfolding around them. At 6 a.m., Jerry called his sister, Trish Cameron, 45, in Glasgow, his voice breaking as he told her, "Madeleine's been taken. We don't know what to do." Trish immediately began contacting family members, while Kate's mother, Susan Healy, 62, booked a flight from Liverpool to Portugal to support her daughter. The McCanns' friends, the Tapas 7, rallied around them, helping to organize searches and distribute photos of Madeleine, her blonde hair and distinctive eye fleck, a coloboma in her right iris, making her easily recognizable. The PJ, led by Chief Inspector Goncalo Amaral, 47, took charge of the investigation, but their early efforts were marred by missteps. The apartment, 5A, had not been properly sealed off, and fingerprints were collected haphazardly, with many surfaces already contaminated by the crowd that had searched the area. At 8 a.m., Amaral arrived at the scene, a burly man with a stern demeanor, and began interviewing the McCanns and their friends. Kate and Jerry explained their routine of checking on the children every half hour during dinner at the Tapas restaurant, 55 meters away. They pointed to the open bedroom window and raised shutter as evidence of an abduction, but Amaral seemed skeptical, noting that the window could have been opened by someone inside the apartment. "We need to consider all possibilities," he told his team, his tone gruff, as he ordered a search of the surrounding area. By mid-morning, the quiet streets of Praia da Luz were filled with activity as local police, volunteers, and residents joined the search for Madeleine. Sniffer dogs were brought in to comb the resort and nearby beaches, while divers searched the ocean for any sign of the little girl. At 10 a.m., a British tourist named Jane Tanner, 36, one of the Tapas 7, came forward with a crucial piece of information. She told the PJ that around 9:15 p.m. the previous night, while checking on her own children, she had seen a man walking away from the McCann's apartment block, carrying a child in his arms. The child was wearing light-colored pajamas, similar to the ones Madeleine had on, white with a pink Eeyore design. The man was about 5 feet 9 inches, slim, with dark hair, and he had been walking quickly, heading toward the beach. Tanner's sighting became the first major lead in the case, and the PJ began working on a sketch of the suspect, though the description was vague and difficult to act on immediately. The media descended on Praia da Luz with unprecedented speed, turning the McCann's private tragedy into a global spectacle. By noon on May 4th, 2007, news vans lined the streets outside the Ocean Club, and reporters from the BBC, Sky News, and international outlets like CNN were broadcasting live. The story of a British toddler vanishing from a holiday resort struck a chord with audiences worldwide, and Madeleine's face, her wide smile and distinctive eye fleck, became an instant symbol of innocence lost. At 2 p.m., Kate and Jerry made their first public statement, standing outside the resort with a photo of Madeleine, their voices trembling as they pleaded for her return. "We just want our daughter back," Jerry said, his eyes red from crying. "Please, if you have any information, come forward." Kate, clutching Cuddle Cat, added, "Madeleine is a beautiful little girl. We're devastated. Please help us find her." The raw emotion in their words resonated with millions, and the case quickly became a media sensation. As the day progressed, more leads emerged, though many proved to be dead ends. At 3 p.m., a local woman named Maria Santos, 52, reported seeing a suspicious man loitering near the Ocean Club earlier that week, describing him as tall with a scruffy beard. The PJ followed up, but the man turned out to be a maintenance worker at the resort with no connection to the case. At 5 p.m., a British expat living in Praia da Luz called the police to report a sighting of a child matching Madeleine's description in a nearby village, but it was a false alarm. The child was a local girl with her family. The flurry of tips overwhelmed the PJ, who were already struggling with limited resources and the language barrier, as many witnesses were British tourists who spoke little Portuguese. By the evening of May 4, 2007, the investigation had taken on an international dimension. The British government, under Prime Minister Tony Blair, offered support, sending consular staff from the British Embassy in Lisbon to assist the McCanns. At 7 p.m., the Foreign Office announced that British police would be dispatched to Portugal to help with the investigation, a move that highlighted the case's high profile, but also hinted at early tensions between British and Portuguese authorities. Meanwhile, the McCann's family and friends back in the UK launched a grassroots campaign, printing posters with Madeleine's photo and setting up a hotline for tips. The world watched as the search for Madeleine McCann intensified, but with each passing hour, the hope of finding her alive began to fade, leaving Kate and Jerry to face the agonizing uncertainty of their daughter's fate. In the days following Madeleine McCann's disappearance on May 3, 2007, from the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal, the investigation into her whereabouts intensified, but so did the challenges facing the authorities. The Polícia Judiciária, PJ, led by Chief Inspector Goncalo Amaral, struggled with a lack of resources, language barriers, and a crime scene that had been compromised in the chaotic first hours. Kate and Jerry McCann, both 39, clung to hope that their 3-year-old daughter would be found alive, while the global media frenzy surrounding the case grew, amplifying every development. By mid-May 2007, as the search continued, early leads faltered, and the first whispers of suspicion began to fall on the McCanns themselves, adding a new layer of strain to their already unbearable ordeal. The search for Madeleine expanded rapidly in the first week. On May 5, 2007, the PJ deployed more officers to Praia da Luz, bringing the total to over 100, while helicopters and boats scoured the coastline and nearby waters. Volunteers from the local community, along with British tourists staying at the Ocean Club, joined the effort, combing through fields, beaches, and abandoned buildings. At 9 a.m., a team of sniffer dogs from Lisbon arrived, trained to detect human scent, and began searching the area around the McCann's apartment 5A. The dogs picked up a faint trail leading toward the beach, but it quickly dissipated, leaving investigators with little to go on. Meanwhile, the PJ followed up on Jane Tanner's sighting of a man carrying a child at 9:15 p.m. on the night Madeleine vanished. On May 6, 2007, they released an artist's sketch of the suspect, described as a slim man about 5 feet 9 inches with dark hair, but the vague description led to hundreds of tips, most of which were dead ends. Kate and Jerry, supported by their friends, the Tapas 7, and family members who had flown in from the UK threw themselves into the search. On May 7, 2007, they held a press conference at the Ocean Club, their second public appearance since Madeleine's disappearance. Standing side by side, they held up a poster of Madeleine, her bright smile and distinctive eye fleck, a coloboma in her right iris, staring out at the cameras. "We're living a nightmare," Kate said, her voice trembling as she clutched Madeleine's cuddle cat, the pink stuffed toy her daughter had slept with. "Please, if you know anything, help us bring her home." Jerry, his arm around Kate, added, "We believe Madeleine is still alive, and we won't stop until we find her." The press conference was broadcast live on BBC, Sky News, and CNN, reaching millions worldwide, and the McCann's raw emotion galvanized public support, with donations pouring in to help fund the search. The media coverage, however, was a double-edged sword. By May 8, 2007, Praia da Luz was overrun with journalists, with over 200 reporters and camera crews camped outside the Ocean Club. British tabloids like The Sun and the Daily Mail ran daily front-page stories, while Portuguese papers like Correio de Manhã published sensational headlines, some questioning the McCann's decision to leave their children alone during dinner. The intense scrutiny began to take a toll on Kate and Jerry, who were already struggling to cope with their grief. On May 9, 2007, a British journalist, Martin Brunt, 52, from Sky News, approached Kate outside the resort, asking, "Do you feel responsible for leaving Madeleine alone?" Kate froze, her eyes filling with tears, before walking away without answering. The question, though, lingered in the public consciousness, planting the first seeds of doubt about the McCann's actions. The PJ's investigation faced mounting criticism as the days passed without a breakthrough. On May 10, 2007, British police officers from Leicestershire Constabulary arrived in Portugal to assist, bringing expertise in missing persons cases. They were led by Detective Superintendent Bob Small, 48, who worked closely with the PJ to review the evidence. Small was troubled by the lack of forensic analysis from the apartment. Fingerprints had been collected, but many were smudged, and no DNA evidence had been properly secured in the initial hours. He also noted that the PJ had not conducted formal interviews with the Tapas 7, relying instead on brief statements taken on the night of the disappearance. Small urged Amaral to re-interview the group, but Amaral resisted, focusing instead on the abduction theory and the search for the man Jane Tanner had seen. On May 12, 2007, Madeleine's 4th birthday, the McCanns held a small, private gathering in their temporary apartment at the Ocean Club, surrounded by family and friends. Kate and Jerry bought a small cake and a few presents for Madeleine, hoping against hope that she would be found to celebrate with them. At 11 a.m., they attended a mass at the local church, Nossa Senhora de Luz, where Father José Manuel Pacheco, 55, led a prayer for Madeleine's safe return. Kate, holding Sean and Amelie, broke down in tears during the service, her sobs echoing through the small church. Outside, hundreds of well-wishers left flowers, teddy bears, and messages of support, but the day was a painful reminder of Madeleine's absence, and the lack of progress in the investigation weighed heavily on the McCanns. By mid-May, the PJ began to shift their focus, as the abduction theory failed to yield results. On May 15, 2007, they interviewed a British-Portuguese man named Robert Murat, 33, who lived 150 meters from the McCann's apartment. Murat had been helping with the search, acting as a translator for the police, but 3 members of the Tapas 7, Fiona Payne, Russell O'Brien, and Rachel Oldfield, reported seeing him near the Ocean Club on the night Madeleine disappeared, despite Murat claiming he had been at home with his mother. The PJ searched Murat's house, seizing computers and other items, and named him an arguido, a formal suspect under Portuguese law, on May 16, 2007. The media seized on the development, with headlines proclaiming Murat as the prime suspect, but no evidence directly linked him to Madeleine, and his arguido status would later be lifted. The investigation took a darker turn on May 20, 2007, when the PJ began to consider the possibility that the McCanns themselves were involved. Amaral, who had grown increasingly skeptical of the abduction theory, noted inconsistencies in the McCann's timeline, particularly the fact that the bedroom window and shutter, which they claimed were evidence of an intruder, showed no signs of forced entry. He also questioned why the twins had not woken up during the alleged abduction, given the noise it would have caused. At a meeting with his team, Amaral said, "We need to look at the parents. It's not uncommon in cases like this." The PJ requested permission to search the McCann's temporary apartment and seize their belongings, including Madeleine's cuddle cat, for forensic testing. The move marked the beginning of a shift in the investigation, one that would soon place Kate and Jerry under intense suspicion, as the world watched their every move with bated breath. By the summer of 2007, the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeleine McCann from the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal, on May 3rd, had gripped the world, with millions following the case through relentless media coverage. Kate and Jerry McCann, both 39, had spent the first weeks after their daughter's vanishing tirelessly searching for her, supported by their friends, family, and a global outpouring of sympathy. But as the investigation led by the Polícia Judiciária, PJ, failed to produce a breakthrough, the focus began to shift in a shocking direction. By July 2007, the McCanns found themselves under suspicion, as forensic developments involving sniffer dogs and DNA evidence raised questions, and tensions between the family and the Portuguese police reached a boiling point, forever altering the trajectory of the case. The shift in the investigation became evident in late June 2007, as the PJ, under Chief Inspector Goncalo Amaral, grew increasingly skeptical of the abduction theory. On June 25, 2007, Amaral met with his team in Portimão, the regional headquarters of the PJ, to discuss the case's progress, or lack thereof. The lead involving Robert Murat, the British-Portuguese man named in Arguido in May, had stalled, with no concrete evidence linking him to Madeleine's disappearance. Amaral, now 48, turned his attention to the McCanns, pointing to inconsistencies in their story. He noted that the bedroom window and shutter, which Kate and Jerry claimed were evidence of an intruder, showed no signs of forced entry, and the timeline of their checks on the children raised questions about the window of opportunity for an abductor. "We need to look closer at the parents," Amaral told his team, his voice firm. "The evidence isn't adding up." The PJ's suspicions intensified on July 10, 2007, when they requested assistance from British police to bring in specialized sniffer dogs to re-examine the McCann's apartment, 5A, and other locations. 2 dogs, Eddie and Keela, were flown in from the UK, handled by British trainer Martin Grime, 55. Eddie was a cadaver dog trained to detect the scent of human remains, while Keela was a blood detection dog, capable of identifying minute traces of blood even after cleaning. On July 12, 2007, the dogs were taken to the Ocean Club, where they searched apartment 5A, which had been sealed off since Madeleine's disappearance. Eddie alerted in the living room, near the sofa, and in the bedroom, behind a wardrobe, indicating the possible presence of a cadaver scent. Keela then signaled the presence of blood in the same areas, as well as on the floor tiles beneath the sofa. The findings were a bombshell, suggesting that a body may have been in the apartment after Madeleine's disappearance, directly contradicting the abduction narrative. The PJ expanded the search on July 15, 2007, taking the dogs to a car the McCanns had rented 24 days after Madeleine vanished, a silver Renault Scenic. Eddie alerted to the scent of a cadaver in the trunk and on the driver's side door, while Keela detected blood traces on the car key and in the trunk. The dogs also searched vehicles belonging to Robert Murat and the Tapas 7, but no alerts were recorded. The PJ collected samples from the apartment and the car, sending them to the Forensic Science Service, FSS, in Birmingham, UK, for DNA analysis. On July 20, 2007, Amaral briefed his superiors, stating, "The dog's alerts suggest Madeleine may have died in the apartment, and her body was moved later. The parents are now our primary focus." The McCanns, unaware of the dog's findings, continued their public campaign, holding a press conference in Lisbon that day to mark 78 days since Madeleine's disappearance, pleading for information about their daughter. The forensic developments leaked to the media in early August 2007, igniting a firestorm of speculation. On August 5, 2007, the Portuguese tabloid Correio de Manhã ran a front-page story with the headline, "Blood Found in McCann's Apartment," citing unnamed police sources. British papers like The Sun and the Daily Mail followed suit, with headlines questioning the McCann's innocence. The public, who had initially rallied behind Kate and Gerry, began to turn, with online forums and comment sections filled with accusations. On August 6, 2007, a Twitter user named @TruthSeekerUK posted, "If there's blood and cadaver scent in the apartment, how can this be an abduction? The parents need to explain." The media frenzy reached new heights, with reporters hounding the McCanns at every turn, their cameras flashing as Kate and Gerry left their temporary apartment in Praia da Luz to attend church. The PJ received the initial DNA results from the FSS on August 10, 2007, but the findings were inconclusive. The samples from the apartment contained a mixture of DNA from multiple people, making it difficult to identify a clear match to Madeleine. The blood traces in the car were also problematic. While some markers were consistent with Madeleine's DNA, the sample was degraded and not a definitive match. Amaral, however, interpreted the results as incriminating, believing they supported the theory that Madeleine had died in the apartment and her body had been moved. On August 15, 2007, the PJ formally interviewed Kate and Gerry as witnesses, not yet as suspects, at the Portimão police station. The interviews were tense, with Amaral pressing them on the dog's findings. "How do you explain the scent of a cadaver in your apartment?" he asked Gerry, his tone accusatory. Gerry, visibly shaken, replied, "We can't explain it. Madeleine was taken. Maybe the dogs are wrong." Kate, clutching Cuddle Cat, added, "I know my daughter is alive. You're wasting time looking at us." The growing suspicion took a toll on the McCanns, who felt increasingly isolated from the Portuguese police. On August 20, 2007, they met with their British liaison officer, John Buck, 50, from the Foreign Office, to express their frustration. "We're being treated like suspects instead of grieving parents," Gerry said, his voice tight with anger. "They're not looking for Madeleine, they're trying to blame us." Buck promised to relay their concerns to British authorities, but the rift between the McCanns and the PJ was widening. The media continued to fuel the narrative, with Portuguese outlets like Diário de Notícias publishing stories suggesting the McCanns had accidentally killed Madeleine and staged an abduction to cover it up. The pressure was unbearable, and Kate and Gerry began to fear that the investigation was veering dangerously off course, leaving Madeleine's true fate further from discovery than ever. By September 2007, the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeleine McCann from the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal, on May 3rd, had become a global obsession, with the case dominating headlines and fueling endless speculation. Kate and Gerry McCann, both 39, had spent the past 4 months searching for their daughter, supported by a massive public campaign and a fund that raised millions to aid the effort. But the investigation by the Polícia Judiciária, PJ, led by Chief Inspector Goncalo Amaral, had taken a dramatic turn, with forensic findings from sniffer dogs and DNA evidence pointing suspicion at the McCanns. As the summer gave way to autumn, Kate and Gerry were named formal suspects, a move that shattered their public image, strained their relationship with the Portuguese police, and threatened to derail the search for Madeleine. The tension reached a breaking point on September 6, 2007, when the PJ summoned Kate and Gerry to the police station in Portimão for formal questioning. The couple had been interviewed as witnesses in August, but the tone had shifted after the forensic results from the UK's Forensic Science Service, FSS, were interpreted by the PJ as incriminating. On the morning of September 6, Kate arrived at the station at 9 a.m., accompanied by her lawyer, Carlos Pinto de Abreu, 50, a respected Portuguese attorney. Jerry waited outside with their twins, Sean and Amelie, now 2 years old, his face etched with worry. Inside, Kate faced a grueling interrogation led by Amaral, now 48, who presented her with the sniffer dog findings. Cadaver scent and blood traces detected in their apartment, 5A, and the rental car they had used 24 days after Madeleine's disappearance. "How do you explain this?" Amaral asked, his voice cold as he slid photos of the dog's alerts across the table. Kate, clutching Madeleine's cuddle cat, replied, "I can't explain it. Those dogs must be wrong. My daughter was taken." The interrogation lasted 11 hours, with Kate facing increasingly aggressive questions. Amaral suggested that Madeleine had died in the apartment, possibly by accident, and that Kate and Jerry had hidden her body to cover it up. He pointed to the DNA evidence, claiming it matched Madeleine, though the FSS report had stated the samples were inconclusive due to degradation and contamination. At one point, Amaral asked, "Did you sedate your children that night? Is that why the twins didn't wake up?" Kate, a trained doctor, was horrified by the accusation, her voice rising as she said, "No, I would never do that. I'm a mother. I love my children." By the time the session ended at 8 p.m., Kate was exhausted, her hands trembling as she left the station. The PJ informed her that she would be named an arguida, a formal suspect under Portuguese law, giving her the right to remain silent, but also marking a significant escalation in the case. Jerry faced his own interrogation the following day, September 7, 2007, at 10 a.m. The session was equally intense, lasting 9 hours, with Amaral pressing him on the same forensic evidence. Jerry, also a doctor, challenged the reliability of the sniffer dogs, stating, "Those dogs aren't infallible. There's no definitive proof Madeleine died in that apartment." He grew frustrated as Amaral suggested that the couple had staged an abduction, asking, "Where did you hide her body?" Jerry's voice cracked as he replied, "I didn't hide her. She was taken. You're wasting time looking at us instead of finding her." At 7 p.m., Jerry was also named an arguido, a designation that stunned the couple and sent shockwaves through the media. As they left the station, a crowd of reporters swarmed them, shouting questions like, "Did you kill your daughter?" Kate and Jerry hurried to their car, their faces pale, the weight of the accusations crushing their spirits. The news of the McCann's arguido status broke on September 8, 2007, dominating headlines around the world. British tabloids like The Sun ran front-page stories with headlines like "McCann's named suspects," while Portuguese papers such as Correio de Manha published lurid details, alleging that Kate had confessed during her interrogation, a claim she vehemently denied. The public reaction was swift and divided. Some continued to support the McCanns, believing they were being unfairly targeted, while others turned against them, convinced by the forensic evidence. On September 9, 2007, a Facebook group called Justice for Madeleine posted a poll asking, "Do you think the McCanns are guilty?" Within hours, thousands voted, with 60% answering yes. The media frenzy intensified, with reporters camping outside the McCanns' temporary apartment in Praia da Luz, their cameras capturing every move. The arguido designation had a devastating impact on the McCanns' public campaign to find Madeleine. The Find Madeleine Fund, which had raised over £1 million through donations, faced scrutiny, with some donors demanding their money back, believing the McCanns were guilty. On September 10, 2007, the fund's director, Clarence Mitchell, 46, a former BBC journalist hired as the McCann spokesperson, held a press conference in London to address the allegations. "Kate and Jerry are innocent," Mitchell said, his voice firm. "They have been through hell, and now they're being vilified instead of supported. The focus should be on finding Madeleine, not on blaming her parents." But the damage was done. Public support waned, and the campaign's momentum faltered, leaving Kate and Jerry feeling more isolated than ever. The rift between the McCanns and the PJ deepened in the wake of the interrogations. On September 12, 2007, Kate and Jerry met with British consular staff in Lisbon, expressing their frustration with the investigation. "They're not looking for Madeleine," Jerry told John Buck, 50, their liaison officer. "They're trying to frame us." Buck relayed their concerns to the British government, which was already pressuring Portugal to improve the investigation. The tension was compounded by cultural differences and mutual distrust. British authorities felt the PJ was mishandling the case, while the PJ resented what they saw as interference from the UK. On September 15, 2007, Amaral gave an interview to Diario de Noticias, stating, "The evidence points to the parents. We believe Madeleine died in the apartment, and they know more than they're saying." The statement infuriated the McCanns, who felt the PJ was more interested in building a case against them than finding their daughter. By the end of September 2007, Kate and Jerry made the difficult decision to return to the UK, feeling that staying in Portugal was no longer productive. On September 9, 2007, they boarded a flight from Faro to East Midlands Airport, their twins in tow, as a crowd of reporters and onlookers watched. When they arrived in Rothley, Leicestershire at 2 p.m., they were greeted by a small group of supporters holding signs that read, "Welcome home." But the shadow of suspicion followed them. The McCanns settled back into their family home, determined to continue the search for Madeleine despite the accusations. But the weight of being named suspects hung over them, a dark cloud that threatened to obscure the truth about what had happened to their little girl. By late 2007, the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeleine McCann from the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal, on May 3rd, had become a global phenomenon, with the case dominating headlines and polarizing public opinion. Kate and Jerry McCann, both 39, had been named formal suspects, arguidos, by the Policia Judiciaria, PJ, in September, following forensic findings that suggested Madeleine may have died in their apartment. The accusation had shattered their public image and strained their campaign to find their daughter, but the McCanns remained determined to clear their names and keep the search alive. Through 2008, significant developments unfolded, including the removal of their arguido status, the shelving of the case, and the release of a controversial book by Chief Inspector Goncalo Amaral, which reignited tensions and kept Madeleine's fate at the forefront of the world's attention. The McCanns returned to their home in Rothley, Leicestershire, on September 9, 2007, after months in Portugal, hoping to regain some semblance of normalcy for their twins, Sean and Amelie, now 2 years old. But the shadow of suspicion followed them, with British tabloids like The Sun and the Daily Express running daily stories questioning their innocence. On September 15, 2007, a neighbor in Rothley, Margaret Evans, 60, left a note on their doorstep that read, "How could you do this to your daughter?" Kate found the note while taking the twins to nursery, her hands trembling as she crumpled it up, tears streaming down her face. The hostility was a stark contrast to the support they had initially received, and it took a toll on the couple. Jerry, trying to shield Kate, took on the role of spokesperson, meeting with their media advisor, Clarence Mitchell, 46, on September 20, 2007, to strategize. "We need to focus on finding Madeleine," Jerry said, his voice firm. "We can't let these accusations stop us." The investigation in Portugal continued to focus on the McCanns, despite a lack of definitive evidence. On October 2, 2007, Goncalo Amaral was removed from the case, a decision made by his superiors at the PJ amid growing criticism of his handling of the investigation. Amaral, now 48, had been accused of misconduct in another case, and his aggressive approach toward the McCanns had drawn scrutiny from both Portuguese and British authorities. His replacement, Paulo Rebelo, 45, took a more measured approach, ordering a review of all evidence. On October 10, 2007, Rebelo re-interviewed the top as 7 in the UK, with British police from Leicestershire Constabulary assisting. The interviews, conducted at a police station in Leicester, aimed to clarify the timeline of the night Madeleine disappeared. Jane Tanner reiterated her sighting of a man carrying a child at 9:15 p.m., but the others' accounts remained consistent with their initial statements, offering no new leads. The forensic evidence that had implicated the McCanns began to unravel in early 2008. On January 15, 2008, the Forensic Science Service, FSS, in Birmingham, UK, sent a final report to the PJ, clarifying that the DNA samples from the McCann's apartment and rental car were not a conclusive match to Madeleine. The samples were degraded and contained DNA from multiple individuals, making it impossible to confirm they belonged to Madeleine. The sniffer dog alerts, while initially compelling, were also called into question. Experts noted that such dogs, while highly trained, were not infallible and could be influenced by environmental factors. On February 5, 2008, Rebello met with his team in Portimao, acknowledging the lack of solid evidence against the McCanns. "We cannot proceed with a case based on assumptions," he said, his tone pragmatic. "We need to either find new evidence or close this line of inquiry." The turning point came on July 21, 2008, when the Portuguese Attorney General's office announced that the investigation into Madeleine's disappearance would be shelved due to insufficient evidence. The McCanns, along with Robert Murat, who had also been named in Arguido, had their suspect status lifted. The decision was a bittersweet victory for Kate and Jerry, who were in Rothley when they received the news. At 2 p.m., Clarence Mitchell held a press conference outside their home, reading a statement on their behalf. "We welcome the decision to clear our names," Mitchell said, as Kate and Jerry stood behind him, their faces a mix of relief and anguish. "But this is not the outcome we wanted. We need to find Madeleine, and we urge the authorities to keep looking." The shelving of the case meant that the PJ would no longer actively investigate unless new evidence emerged, a devastating blow to the McCanns' hopes of finding their daughter. Just days later, on July 24, 2008, Goncalo Amaral published a book titled Maddie, The Truth of the Lie, which reignited the controversy surrounding the case. The book, released in Portugal, detailed Amaral's theory that Madeleine had died in the apartment, possibly by accident, and that the McCanns had covered it up by staging an abduction. Amaral claimed the forensic evidence supported his theory, despite the FSS report's findings, and accused the British government of interfering to protect the McCanns. The book became an instant bestseller in Portugal, selling over 200,000 copies in its first month, and its claims were widely reported in the media. On July 25, 2008, Correio de Manha ran a front-page story with the headline, "Amaral, the McCanns lied," fueling public suspicion once again. Kate and Jerry were devastated by the book's release, seeing it as a betrayal by the man who had once led the search for their daughter. On July 30, 2008, they met with their lawyer, Isabel Duarte, 52, in Lisbon to discuss legal action against Amaral. "This book is full of lies," Kate said, her voice shaking with anger as she held Madeleine's cuddle cat. "It's hurting our search for Madeleine and causing us unimaginable pain." Duarte advised them to file a libel lawsuit, arguing that Amaral's claims were defamatory and unsupported by evidence. The McCanns agreed, and on August 5, 2008, they initiated legal proceedings against Amaral, seeking to ban the book and claim damages for the harm it caused. The lawsuit marked the beginning of a years-long legal battle, one that would further complicate their efforts to keep the focus on finding Madeleine. By the end of 2008, the McCanns were in a precarious position, cleared of suspicion but still battling a narrative that refused to die. On December 24, 2008, they held a small Christmas gathering at their home in Rothley, trying to create some joy for Sean and Amelie, now 3 years old. They placed a photo of Madeleine on the mantelpiece, her smiling face a constant reminder of the void in their lives. As they lit a candle in her memory, Kate whispered, "We'll never stop looking for you, Maddie. The investigation may have been shelved, but the McCanns' fight for their daughter was far from over, even as Amaral's book cast a long shadow over their hopes for the truth." By 2009, the disappearance of 3-year-old Madeleine McCann from the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal, on May 3, 2007, had become a global symbol of unresolved tragedy. The investigation by the Polícia Judiciária (PJ) had been shelved in July 2008, with Kate and Jerry McCann, both now 41, cleared of their arguido status but left without answers about their daughter's fate. The release of Goncalo Amaral's book, Maddie, The Truth of the Lie, had further complicated their efforts, perpetuating the narrative that they were involved in Madeleine's disappearance. Determined to find their daughter, the McCanns turned to private investigations and media campaigns to keep the case alive, while a significant development in 2011, the launch of Operation Grange by the Metropolitan Police, offered renewed hope, even as their legal battle with Amaral continued to cast a shadow over their fight for justice. After the PJ shelved the case, Kate and Jerry refused to give up, channeling their energy into private efforts to find Madeleine. On January 10, 2009, they hired a team of private investigators led by Dave Edgar, 52, a retired British detective with 30 years of experience in the Cheshire Police. Edgar, based in Knutsford, England, assembled a small team to review the case files, which had been made public after the investigation was closed, totaling over 30,000 pages of documents translated from Portuguese. On February 5, 2009, Edgar held a meeting with the McCanns at their home in Rothley, Leicestershire, outlining his approach. "We'll start by re-examining every lead," he said, his tone steady. "The focus will be on the abduction theory. Someone took Madeleine, and we need to find out who." Kate, holding Madeleine's cuddle cat, nodded, her eyes filled with determination. "We just want her back," she said softly. Jerry added, "We'll fund this as long as it takes. We can't stop looking." Edgar's team began by revisiting key witnesses, including Jane Tanner, whose sighting of a man carrying a child at 9:15 p.m. on the night Madeleine disappeared remained a critical lead. On March 15, 2009, Edgar interviewed Tanner in Leicester, asking her to recall every detail of the man she had seen. Tanner described him as slim, about 5 feet 9 inches, with dark hair, wearing beige trousers and carrying a child in light-colored pajamas. Edgar used her description to create a new e-fit, which was released to the public on April 1, 2009, through the Find Madeleine website, a platform the McCanns had launched to keep the case in the public eye. The e-fit generated hundreds of tips, but most led nowhere, with many callers mistaking innocent fathers for the suspect. Despite the setbacks, the McCanns remained committed, using the Find Madeleine Fund, still supported by donations, to finance the investigation, which cost over £100,000 in its first year. The McCanns also leaned heavily on media campaigns to maintain public awareness. On May 3, 2009, the second anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance, they appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show in Chicago, one of the most watched programs in the world. Oprah, 55, welcomed Kate and Jerry with empathy, her studio audience visibly moved as the couple shared their story. Kate held up an age-progressed image of Madeleine, created by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, showing what she might look like at 6 years old. Her blonde hair longer, her face more defined, but her distinctive eye fleck unchanged. "We believe Madeleine is still out there," Jerry said, his voice steady. "Someone knows something, and we're begging them to come forward." The episode, aired to over 20 million viewers, led to a surge in tips to the Find Madeleine hotline, though none provided a breakthrough. The McCanns' efforts were overshadowed by their ongoing legal battle with Goncalo Amaral. In September 2009, a Portuguese court granted the McCanns a temporary injunction to ban Amaral's book, Maddie, The Truth of the Lie, ruling that it was defamatory and harmed the search for Madeleine. On September 10, 2009, their lawyer, Isabel Duarte, 53, announced the decision in Lisbon, stating, "This book has caused immense pain to the McCann family and obstructed the investigation. It will no longer be sold." Amaral, now 50, was ordered to pay €500,000 in damages, but he vowed to appeal, telling Correio de Manha on September 11, 2009, "I stand by my work. The truth will come out." The injunction was a victory for the McCanns, but the legal fight drained their resources and kept the narrative of their guilt alive in Portugal, where many still believed Amaral's claims. A significant turning point came in 2011 when the British government, under pressure from the McCanns and their supporters, intervened. On May 12, 2011, Madeleine's 8th birthday, Kate published a book titled Madeleine, Our Daughter's Disappearance and the Continuing Search for Her, a heartfelt account of the family's ordeal. The book, released by Transworld Publishers, became a bestseller, raising funds for the search and reigniting public interest. That same day, the McCanns met with Home Secretary Theresa May, 54, in London, pleading for a new investigation. Their persistence paid off. On May 13, 2011, Prime Minister David Cameron, 44, announced the launch of Operation Grange, a review of the case by the Metropolitan Police, funded by the Home Office. The operation, led by Detective Chief Inspector Andy Redwood, 48, aimed to re-examine all evidence and pursue new leads, a development that brought renewed hope to the McCanns. On May 15, 2011, Kate and Gerry held a press conference in London to mark the launch of Operation Grange, their faces a mix of exhaustion and optimism. "This is a huge step forward," Gerry said, standing beside Kate, who held an updated age-progressed image of Madeleine at 8 years old. "We're grateful to the British government for taking this seriously. We just want to find our daughter." Operation Grange began with a team of 30 officers, who started by translating and analyzing the 30,000 pages of PJ files. Redwood focused on Jane Tanner's sighting, releasing a new e-fit of the suspect on July 1, 2011, and identifying 41 persons of interest, including 15 British nationals, to be interviewed. The operation gave the McCanns a renewed sense of purpose, but the road ahead remained uncertain, with the legal battle against Amaral still looming and the mystery of Madeleine's fate as elusive as ever. By the end of 2011, Kate and Gerry had made significant strides in keeping Madeleine's case alive through private investigations, media campaigns, and the launch of Operation Grange. On December 24, 2011, they attended a Christmas Eve service at their local church in Rothley, holding Sean and Amelie, now 6 years old, as they lit a candle for Madeleine. The flame flickered in the dim light, a symbol of the hope they refused to let die, even as the years stretched on and the truth remained just out of reach. By 2012, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann from the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal, on May 3, 2007, had become one of the most enduring mysteries in modern history, a case that continued to captivate the world nearly 2 decades later. Kate and Gerry McCann, both now 57, had spent the intervening years fighting to keep their daughter's case alive, supported by private investigations and the launch of Operation Grange by the Metropolitan Police in 2011. Despite new leads, including the identification of a prime suspect in 2020, the case remained unsolved as of April 2025, leaving the McCanns to balance their ongoing search for Madeleine with the emotional toll of an unresolved tragedy, while their advocacy ensured her legacy endured. Operation Grange, led by Detective Chief Inspector Andy Redwood, made significant progress in its early years. By 2013, the team had reviewed over 40,000 documents and identified 41 persons of interest. On October 14, 2013, the Metropolitan Police released 2 new e-fits of a man seen carrying a child in Praia da Luz on the night Madeleine disappeared, based on witness statements that had been overlooked by the Polícia Judiciária, PJ. The e-fits, broadcast on BBC's Crime Watch, showed a man aged 20 to 40 with short brown hair, and the program generated over 2,400 calls and emails with potential leads. Redwood, now 50, stated at a press conference in London, "We believe this man may be key to understanding what happened to Madeleine." The Crime Watch appeal led to the elimination of a previous suspect, a man seen by Jane Tanner at 9:15 p.m., who was identified as an innocent British father carrying his child home from a creche, a breakthrough that shifted the timeline of the abduction to around 10 p.m., when Kate discovered Madeleine missing. The McCanns continued their public campaign, using media appearances to keep Madeleine's face in the public eye. On May 3, 2014, the 7th anniversary of her disappearance, they appeared on ITV's This Morning with hosts Philip Schofield, 52, and Holly Willoughby, 33. Kate held an updated age-progressed image of Madeleine at 11 years old, her blonde hair shoulder length, her distinctive eye fleck still prominent. "We still believe Madeleine could be alive," Jerry said, his voice steady but his eyes filled with pain. "We're grateful for Operation Grange, but we need more answers." The interview coincided with a search in Praia da Luz, where British and Portuguese police excavated a plot of land near the Ocean Club from June 2 to June 8, 2014, following a lead about disturbed ground. The search, costing £1 million, yielded no evidence, a disappointing outcome that left Kate and Jerry grappling with renewed grief. A major breakthrough came in June 2020, when German prosecutors identified Christian Bruckner, a 43-year-old German drifter with a history of sexual offenses against children, as a prime suspect. Bruckner had lived in the Algarve between 1995 and 2007, working odd jobs and committing burglaries, often targeting holiday apartments. On June 3, 2020, the Braunschweig prosecutor, Hans Christian Wolters, 43, announced that Bruckner was being investigated for Madeleine's murder, stating, "We have strong evidence that Madeleine is dead and that this man is responsible." Bruckner was already in prison in Germany, serving a 7-year sentence for the 2005 rape of a 72-year-old American woman in Praia da Luz, just 1.5 miles from the Ocean Club. German police revealed that Bruckner's mobile phone records placed him in the area on the evening of May 3, 2007, and that he had confessed to a friend in 2017 that he knew what had happened to Madeleine. The McCanns, now 52, received the news with a mix of hope and dread. On June 4, 2020, Clarence Mitchell, their spokesperson, released a statement. "Kate and Jerry welcome this development and hope it leads to answers about Madeleine's fate." Operation Grange worked with German and Portuguese authorities to investigate Bruckner, searching his former home in the Algarve on July 10, 2020, and a garden allotment near Hanover, Germany, on July 27, 2020. The searches uncovered items like USB drives and clothing, but no definitive evidence linking Bruckner to Madeleine. By 2022, German prosecutors had charged Bruckner with several other crimes in the Algarve, including a 2004 rape and a 2007 indecent exposure case, but they lacked the concrete evidence needed to charge him in Madeleine's case, leaving the investigation at a standstill. The McCann's legal battle with Goncalo Amaral also continued to unfold. In 2015, a Portuguese court awarded them €500,000 in damages for Amaral's book, but the decision was overturned in 2016 by the Lisbon Court of Appeal, which ruled that Amaral's freedom of expression trumped the McCann's claims. The case reached the European Court of Human Rights, ECHR, in 2019, and on September 20, 2023, the ECHR upheld the Portuguese ruling, stating that Amaral's book, while distressing, did not violate the McCann's rights. Kate and Jerry, now 56, were devastated by the decision, with Kate writing on the Find Madeleine website on September 21, 2023. "This ruling allows lies to continue hurting our family and the search for Madeleine. We will never give up on her." As of April 2025, the case remained unsolved, with Christian Bruckner still the prime suspect, but no charges filed in Madeleine's disappearance. Operation Grange, now scaled back to a team of 4 officers, continued to follow leads, with the Home Office allocating £13 million to the investigation by 2025. On May 3, 2024, the 17th anniversary of Madeleine's disappearance, the McCanns held a small vigil in Rothley, attended by 200 supporters. They released an age-progressed image of Madeleine at 21 years old, her features strikingly similar to Kate's, her blonde hair long, and her eye fleck still a defining mark. "We still hold hope that Madeleine is out there," Jerry said, his voice breaking as he stood beside Kate, who held Sean and Amelie, now 20 years old and university students. On April 4, 2025, Kate and Jerry visited the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Alexandria, Virginia, to advocate for missing children worldwide, a cause they had championed through the Find Madeleine campaign. They met with families of other missing children, sharing their story and offering support. As they stood in front of a wall of photos, Madeline's image among them, Kate whispered, "We'll never stop, Maddie. We love you." The disappearance of Madeleine McCann remained an enduring mystery, a case that had tested the McCanns' resilience and captured the world's attention. But their unwavering commitment ensured that Madeleine's name would never be forgotten, a beacon of hope in the face of an unresolved tragedy.